Hey, beautiful souls, what's happening? It's your boy Thief to the EJ Wilson, man. And yeah, I don't know who's gonna get on this live stream, so I'm just gonna start talking. And when y'all feel like joining me, y'all join me. But listen, man. Um, my boy Jesse Bachelor Parish posted something today on Facebook that said that this was actually damn near to the day, the 400th anniversary of when our forebearers, our ancestors, were brought over here in chains to Jamestown, Virginia. Meaning, according to those who believe in the prophecy of the Hebrew Israelites and the fact that black people are supposedly the chosen folks, the time is up. The Savior is supposed to have arrived. Black folks are supposed to be liberated. It is exactly 400 years, almost to the day, as I am doing this live stream podcast, right? And I started thinking to myself, man, if America as an experiment does fail, it won't be because of black people. We've literally given everything we can to this experiment. We've literally given every single thing that we can, right? We've given our lives, we've given our time, we've given our labor, we've given our bodies, we've given our culture, we've given our very souls, our children and our children's children to the American experiment. That is a fact. You see what I'm saying? We can't give any more to America than what black folks have given to America, right? And the problem with America is that its enemy is just a resurgent infection of white supremacy, the most dangerous enemy America ever had. And I don't think that white supremacists even realize that they are this. The most dangerous enemy to America is white supremacy in and of itself, right? Why is that? Because white supremacy is inhumane and American ideals are extremely humanistic. Like if you look at it, when somebody says, fuck America, I hate this country, I don't ever want to, we pledge allegiance to it, but it never pledges allegiance to us, right? When somebody says that stuff, they're not talking about the ideals, life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness, right? The freedoms guaranteed in the Constitution, the Bill of Rights, and all of the amendments that are supposed to make us free, 13, 14, and 15 amendments, right? They're not saying, fuck that. That ain't what they're saying. When people say, fuck America, I hate this country, what they're really saying is fuck all the people who espouse these ideas and yet live by white supremacist doctrine and practice. You know what I'm saying? Whenever America has done something anti-American, it has almost always been in the name of white supremacy or in the practice of white supremacy. See what I'm saying? So I always felt like if the day of emancipation was July 4th, 1776, if the founding fathers was to say something like, dang, you know what? We just got free from Britain and we probably need to let all these black folks go too, right? If the founding fathers freed black folks the day that they got free from British rule, then you probably had a chance to have America have a fresh start right then and there, right? That you could actually address the hypocrisy at the root. But the fact is that slavery continued for another 90 years after that. You see what I'm saying? It had already been in practice for 200 years roughly, because really people say it's 1619, but actually prior to that, the first Africans came over to the New World around 1555 underneath John Hawkins, right? So the American experiment is supposed to be a beacon to the world. And actually for a while it was. Like if you read about what the colonial powers and the ruling powers of Britain thought about America, this shit was a dangerous experiment, like self-governorship. You see what I'm saying? Self-rule was the scariest thing that like the kings and the queens of England and France and Germany and Russia and Prussia at the time, right? They never thought about the American experiment, right? The possibility that it could actually be a success. You feel me? But its practices against black and brown bodies are the things that have made America hypocritical. So when we don't like this country, that's what we're disliking. You see what I mean? I was today attending a meeting that embodied so much of what is exactly wrong with America. Like I remember just watching this meeting. I was sitting here and it was for the Commission for the Renaming of the Stapleton neighborhood, right? Now, for those of y'all not in Colorado, Stapleton was in fact a Klan member. Okay, Stapleton was a mayor of Denver who did a lot of shit for Denver, but the only problem was the motherfucker was in the KKK. Okay, and he he's got a neighborhood, airport named after him and shit like that. Well, there's been a movement going on to rename the neighborhood Stapleton, right? Rename it something the fuck else. And what's been going on is that there's all this pushback, this inertia, this it's inconvenient, it's gonna cost us money type of bullshit going on. You see what I'm saying? The renamed Stapleton people are exhibiting the exact behavior that so many folks in history have exhibited when we try to express the desire for equality, the most very American thing. That's the issue with it. The inertia of white supremacy makes America in damn near an impossible dream, yo. You see what I mean? 400 years later, almost the day, 400 years later, this is what we're left with, right? What's so sad about the country is that the pendulum tends to swing. Anybody who studies history know America, give it to America, take it away. America, give it to America, take it away. That's what it is. You know what I mean? Those of us who know about the Reconstruction era, for example, huge example, right? 1865, emancipation happens. For 12 motherfucking years after this, for 12 years after this, right? You have what looks like it's the beginnings of America actually being America, right? And there was writings even back then that this was about to be a post-racial society. Can you imagine that? Motherfuckers in 1860, 1877 thought that this was about to be a post-racial society. Didn't happen, right? We know that the betrayal of 1877 took all the Northern troops out of the South and states' rights took effect. And before we know it, they had full-on Jim Crow for another 100 years, right? When my daddy was born, Jim Crow was still 20 years from being undone. You know what I mean? Like, this is where we at right now. It ain't really been that long. And it's a sad thing. But somebody, when I did a live stream, said, you cannot expect this country to love black folks, given its behavior. They said white folks don't give a fuck about us. I found that to be, to a certain extent, true, except for the fact that there are white people who have been non-racist, who've been laying their lives down on the line for us and all kind of shit, right? The issue is that they never seems to be enough of them. There never seems to be just enough of them. Like, I know white folks right now that have put their bodies in harm's way to protect black and brown folks. I've seen allies like that just because I'm an activist. So I move through these communities. There's motherfucking white folks who's ride or die out here. But they've always been there. You know what I'm saying? In a minority, they've always been there. Racism doesn't have to be a 100% thing in white folks who affect 100% of black folks, just because of the way that the power dynamic is set up globally right now. You see what I'm saying? So I fear that if America can't do right by us, right? If it can't do right by people of color, it's one of my favorite flags right here. I got this flag, little young Native American brother, you know what I'm saying? Chief sitting up right here with the American bald eagle, right? It's one of my favorite flags ever, you know what I'm saying? And to me, until the president looked like that, it sure ain't America, you know what I'm saying? In my experience, historically speaking, you had to take a bullet for the black person not to be racist 2019, according to you. Johnny Cage, what's up, bro? Glad you're listening. Let's address that. Here's what happens, my man. Historically speaking, as European colonizers were going out and civilizing the world, they themselves were getting civilized. For example, black folks fighting for the civil rights of this country was literally a fight just to civilize white people. Like, when you look at it, when you lynch somebody, when you hang them, when you cut their testicles off and pass them around the crowd, when you gut pregnant women, right? And take their bodies out and take the babies' bodies out and stomp them in the head, their brains gushing everywhere. You're not civilized, right? Hate crime legislation was there to civilize white people. Benjamin Franklin spoke about, in one of the commissions that they had right before the forming of the Union, there was a chieftain from the Iroquois Federation. And the Iroquois Federation said, we have an agreement among these 5 nations, right? And when you look at what that agreement looked like, it looks a lot like the Constitution. So even the experimental democracy in and of itself, Benjamin Franklin will tell you that it came from Native Americans, right? Right now, The practice of yoga is civilizing white folks all across the world. Like the practice of yoga, right? Harmonizing mind and body. That is a practice invented by the brown folks of India. You see? So when this colonization started to happen, it was actually white folks being civilized by those who they encountered. I find that very interesting. You see what I'm saying? Because the story never gets told like that. But do white people have to take a bullet for black people to not be racist? Nah. All you got to do is take a look inside, bro. You know what I mean? And the issue is that what's most important here is that white people are a myth, actually. White people is a myth, right? James Baldwin talked about that. Whiteness being a full-on myth. You know what I mean? And what he says is that the boundaries of whiteness have changed throughout history. You see what I'm saying? Like first Greeks weren't allowed in, Jews weren't allowed in, Italians weren't allowed in. Then to bolster the numbers for the troops of World War I, they were finally allowed in. Irish weren't allowed in, now they're allowed in. You see what I'm saying? So white is a fabrication. It's never been a real thing. You see what I'm saying? European people weren't a big happy family. That's what's so funny to me about like all these white supremacists who say that they want an ethno state. White supremacists like, I want an ethno state where nothing but white people are all around. It is me and my white brothers and sisters. Listen, man, you motherfuckers had so much war in Europe. Sorry, let me rephrase that. White people had so much war in Europe that it took the mutually assured destruction of the thermonuclear warhead to have Europeans collaborate. Like when they say 2 world wars, those actually weren't 2 world wars, right? Those were wars of European powers that had global implications. You see what I'm saying? So the idea of white people is actually a fiction. You see what I'm saying? Like these are just tribes that made themselves white during colonization. That's it. But there wasn't a big happy family. You've had plenty of white ethno states. They all went to war with each other. Does that make sense? Like there's never been harmony among the white tribes, right? Not even when you came to America. So not even when you came here to this country. So I think that it's a sad thing. White supremacy is now and has always been the greatest enemy to America. Always has been. Like, look at this, right? The 2 greatest military threats that America has ever faced have been both from explicitly racist empires. So the South, right? The Empire of Cotton was responsible for the Civil War, you know what I'm saying? Or they would say it's a war of northern aggression. War of northern aggression caused the Civil War. Well, when you look at it, what you had was a massive bloodletting of white bodies. Massive bloodletting of white bodies. I believe at some cosmic level, it was the karmic price to pay for all the slaves killed, all of the Native Americans killed. You see what I'm saying? Like white bodies had to pay for that. They said that if you scaled up the numbers in the Civil War to match the current population, you would have about 6 million dead Americans. Can you imagine that? 6 million dead Americans. Like no war has ever killed 6 million Americans. You see what I'm saying? That was a war against white supremacy. White supremacy is the enemy of America. The second great turmoil, when you have the war against, when you have the war against the Nazi Empire, took so much lives. Does that make sense? Like, it's so funny when people talk about, Antifa versus the alt-right, right? The anti-fascists versus the alt-right. What I've seen specifically is Antifa never shows up to harm the public. They only show up when the alt-right shows up. Anti-fascism is what my grandfather was. My grandfather was a Tuskegee Airman. My grandfather literally was among the first black men to fly. Theobald Wilson, right, of the 99th Airborne, fought Hitler on Hitler's ground. He was an anti-fascist, right? I remember when Antifa was called the American Army, and the fact that there's been this false equivocation drawn between the two says that white supremacists are in control of the narrative as well. See what I'm saying? Like that is a white supremacist narrative. It has nothing to do with reality. White supremacy is the greatest evil. It is the greatest danger. It is literally the greatest danger to this country. And so every challenge to white supremacy, every time white supremacy is called to the carpet, it is an invitation for white people to come back into their humanity. because white supremacy isn't in and of itself inhumane. In fact, it's a fabrication after what we call Bacon's Rebellion. Like Bacon's Rebellion took place around the 1600s because poor white people and poor black people and poor indigenous people started seeing that, in fact, they had more in common with each other than they had with the rich white folks. See what I'm saying? And so, in order to, Bacon's Rebellion was quelled. And then the rich white guy said, holy shit, I got to get the poor white guy on my team. Let me tell him that he's a part of this, right? And so though he may be a menial labor, though he may be somebody who's not making a whole lot of money, when it comes to promoting either him, the indigenous person, or the black person, I'm going to promote the white guy first, right? And so it was the divide and conquer set forth by rich white guys to get poor white guys on their team, right? But the problem with the doctrine of white supremacy is that it is a doctrine of bloodshed. And the Constitution is the doctrine of humanism. It is an absolutely humanist doctrine. Those who have said that the American Constitution is a damn near perfect document, it's actually right. Like, ideologically speaking, it is amazing, right? But the very things that make white people hypocrites to that have all to do with racism and white supremacy. All of it. All of it. And if they can't face that, and if they can't own it, if they can't see the destruction that's being caused by that, then they are actually responsible for the downfall of literally the greatest empire that this world has ever seen. You see what I'm saying? Like, militarily, there's no question. And so it's amazing, man. Those white supremacist people, at least those who choose to be white supremacists now, are willfully ignorant. They've been shown the light. They've chosen to turn away. And there's a high karmic consequence for that. There's a high personal consequence for that. One thing I found about those who are white supremacists is that none of them are actually happy. Like, they're not living their best lives. Like, often they're stuck in cyclical blame games that have been taught to blame poor people, brown people, and black people for their condition, which has changed. Like, the plight, the fate of white men has definitely changed. You know what I'm saying? Like, this is the first generation of white men that will not get richer than their fathers. That's some new shit in the American paradigm. But they've been taught that it's because of integration. They've been taught because of race mixing, and they've somehow equated equality with some other kind of ideologies that are coming into America. No, the fact is that you're not going to have as much because rich white guys destroyed unions. Literally, one of those guys was Ronald Reagan. Destroyed unions so that there could not be collective bargaining, so that the general wages could lift along with the expenses in this economy. The reason why you won't have as much as your fathers is because of the guys at the top, not at the bottom. They said welfare is the problem, right? Something like $187 billion has been paid in welfare since its inception. $187 billion, that's a whole fuckload. That's a whole fuckload of money, right? But actually, there has been about, 19 trillion paid to socialist welfare for those at the top. That's real. You know what I mean? And so what happens, sadly, is that this is one of those situations where once this empire crumbles, because all empires do crumble, people like Johnny Cage are going to have nobody to blame but themselves. That's sad, man. If you didn't want black people here, you shouldn't have invited us with a whip and a boat. You know, we did not come here looking for life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. That was not, we didn't get pamphlets in Africa like, hey, yo, come here. You see what I'm saying? That's one of the issues with the psychosis of these folks. That's all right. In time, you'll see that if America does not do right by black and brown folks, it indeed does not exist. And that's one of the saddest things of all. In fact, America only looks real when it does right by us. But those who are willfully addicted to the drug of whiteness will in time suffer their own fate. But until then, man, the reason why we reach out is because we are actually all connected. We actually are all tied together. That's a real thing. We are all actually in this thing together. The tragedy of racism is that we are all human, that we are all connected. You see what I'm saying? That genetically speaking, if you look at ancestry DNA, we are all family. They don't want to admit that. There will be a price for that. Anyway, y'all, holla back, man. You know what I'm saying? I'm Theo E.J. Wilson. Like, follow, and share if you agree. And I'll be talking to y'all later. Peace.